Hello and welcome to this Untold Durban interview. Today we're privileged to be joined by South Africa's Emmy award-winning casting director, Christa Schamberger. Christa has been a well-known feature, or shall we say fixture, of the South African film industry for many, many decades. And she's joining us today to speak about how she got to where she is and her Emmy award. Hello, Christa, and thank you for giving us of your time. On your website, it states that you were born in Kenya, and I would expect that that was quite an interesting place to grow up. And I'm wondering how that helped you on the road to where you are today.
I think I was quite fortunate to be born in Kenya at the time I was, because it was still under colonial rule, which, pros and cons set aside. The one thing that I personally benefited from was a genuine interest in theatre, performing arts. I know we all roll our eyes at the amateur circuit, but it's what I had access to as a child. And various random ballet teachers who came from goodness knows where all over the world to these very remote little places. But they were extraordinarily creative people that I interacted with. And I think so much of what you learn as a child is kind of almost by a process of osmosis. You kind of realize that it's not just you wobbling across the stage in a tutu that mom has sewn for you diligently, and very well, I may add. But it took kind of quite a lot of organization to get all of this stuff together. So as I moved from there to Namibia, and I did my high school there, got involved in more of that, and had some remarkably creative and very efficient. It's not always a good combination. Very creative, very efficient teachers, mostly in the ballet world at that stage, but also increasingly in theatre. I remember being the witch in Macbeth in Windhoek, and enjoying that enormously. Participating in all those productions was very helpful for me on a much broader scale as well. And then I went on to university. I went to University of Natal in those days in Durban, and again had some extraordinary teachers. And then what happened after? Oh yes, then I taught at a private school called Durban Girls College for close on 13 years, where I was the drama teacher. And the headmistress that who appointed me to this position was an amazing woman who just gave me free rein. She would sneak into some of my drama lessons every now and again, and every now and again I'd either get a nod of approval or I'd get a slightly raised eyebrow. But I wrote, I taught, I learned how to put a show together, because obviously there's the school play, there's the junior play, there's the senior play, because in those days I taught from preschool right up to matric. So, it gave me a very broad overview on how to do all of that. Anyway, when that kind of came to an end, I think I burnt out a bit. Had a boyfriend who said, "Oh, come and make some money. Come to the film industry in the big city." So he got me onto what was one of the early, really big co-productions that we did here many, many years ago, called Steel Dawn, which shot in Namibia of all places. Of course, it was almost like going home. And that had wonderful people like Patrick Swayze in it. And coming from a world of theatre, being kind of thrown into the deep end of a film set like that, this was a massive American production. So I came in as a third AD, and I learned very quickly that the most important thing is to remember how many sugars the DOP takes in his coffee and don't get it wrong. But, again, and I kind of emphasize this quite a lot when I talk to people, is the people in the know, the production people, the assistant ADs that I was working with, had oodles of experience, but they took the time to explain things to me. You know, they'd send me off to go and do something, and then there'd be like a moment where they'd go, do you understand why you're going to do this? And I find that really interesting, because nowadays I don't see that happening on a set. There are many, many reasons, but I think the pressure and the tightening budget and the expectations of people kind of reduce that a bit. And for me, that was a very interesting experience. I was a hopeless AD. I really didn't know what I was doing. But it was an enormous experience for me, because there's not much that happens on a set that I don't have a pretty good idea about. And that stood me in very good stead, because I did about 3 movies as a very lowly AD. And then, work dries up, as it always does as a freelancer. And I was sitting there going, oh, is this what it's about? And I got an interview as a casting assistant for Q Films. So I thought, oh, I can do that. I mean, I've been doing this most of my life. So I got the job. I rocked up on the Monday and had marvelous time with that, because these were actors that I'd watched or seen on theatre, television, whatever, was kind of in suitable awe of their abilities, and they would disappear into the casting director's little room. They would film and they'd come out again. So this was an interesting job for me, I thought. But then on the Friday morning when I arrived, I was met by the producer with his eyes like a deer caught in headlights, because the casting director had been whisked off to hospital. So there was that proverbial thing where the understudy gets the role because some drama has affected the leading person. So I really got flung into the deep end, because although I was confident about dealing with actors because of my years and years of working in that arena, I knew nothing about film, acting for film, because it is different. And there I had these amazing people who kind of just like stepped in to say, well, come and watch the auditions that we've done. I spent the entire weekend until I was square-eyed watching those and beginning to kind of go, oh, this works and this doesn't. Why? And that question, I think, has never changed for me, because each film, each project that you work on is different. Actors come and go. Sometimes you get to have to deal with children who've never acted before. That's a different kind of approach. Or you deal with professionals who are perhaps a little jaded, or perhaps going through one of those cycles where they're just not on. You've got to learn to adjust accordingly and draw out what you need. And hopefully, there's that little magic moment where it all comes together. The magic moments are few and far between, but they're worth it.
Well, thank you for that very comprehensive overview of the road from the plains of Kenya and through Namibia to Durban and to where we are today. And I suspect that it's not just the casting director picking a page out of the script and giving it to the actor and hoping everything works out. From the little I know of your profession, I hear that you're involved from very early on, and I would expect that you're probably one of the first people that the director contacts to make the production a reality.
Well, I think the casting director and the locations person will probably be the first people that a producer will really reach out to. So my first question after that initial phone call is, can I read the script? Obviously, yes, it sounds obvious, but nowadays that's not so obvious, because you land up signing these draconian NDAs. Anyway, so you read the script. I like to read it at least 3 times. I'm very lucky in that I'm a fast reader. But each time you read, you add another layer. First time I read, I just read it. just to get a sense of it, where it goes, what happens. And then, you start kind of breaking it down in your head. Who are these people in the story? What kind of world are they in? Because that's, obviously if it's a period piece or the genre is quite important. A horror movie is very different from a Disney children's movie, so you kind of have to figure that out in your head. And then by the third time I'm reading it, I'm starting to mark scenes that might be good to use in an audition. Scenes that will give the actor just enough material to showcase what they can do with this character. But because of this NDA, you can't choose pivotal scenes which reveal too much of the plot, etc., etc. So there's quite an art to finding a useful scene that is genuinely helpful. So then you extract those, you put them into a format which is legible and accessible, and then you do what is called a brief, basically, which gives out the information of who the producer is, who the director is, when does it shoot, where does it shoot, and then some less and less these days, just an outline of the theme. I usually try and flesh it out a little bit more. And then quite detailed descriptions of the character. And again, that's become a little bit more tricky because I used to say, and then she dies. now I can't do that anymore. So I have to kind of hint at it. It's really ridiculous. But, just to give them an idea of who this person is. And I've got to the stage now where I really lecture the agents about sending the entire brief, because I think it's really helpful if the character knows who they're talking to in the scene. So that description should also be sent to the actor. So, there's an idea of, oh, I'm talking to my father, or I'm talking to my lover, or, those kind of little bits of information. And those get sent out. The agents send me submissions, suggestions of who they think would be appropriate and available. The availability issue is a big one because this is quite a small pool comparatively, to the States or the UK or Germany or somewhere like that. It's a relatively small pool. And in that brief, then your parameters get narrower and narrower. Does this person need an accent? Do they come from a specific place? So in other words, if we're looking for a Maasai herder, that is that's a concept that we all have in our heads, thanks to years of Kenyan advertising on the tourist board. We kind of know what the man looks like standing holding his spear on one leg in the middle of nowhere. So the look, the age range, the accent, the socioeconomic environment that the character lives in, all of that is part of the world that the character lives in. And then, you start kind of narrowing it down to the people you think should send you an audition. Nowadays, a lot of the first round is what we call the ubiquitous self-tape, which I think is universally hated by all casting directors and most actors. Absolutely. So, yeah. Obviously during COVID, it was practically the only way we could do it. But we'd been doing it before then as well, because if there was a particular actor that you wanted to see, but he happened to be on some remote location in the middle of the Karoo somewhere, then it became possible to do a preliminary audition. By and large, when we get to the callback list, which is like a short list of people that we really like and that we're interested in, then, almost definitely they'll come into the studio and work with me. Now that, COVID is more or less over and we're seeing people again, a lot of actors prefer to come in and have a live audition with the casting director for various obvious reasons, because there's so many things that I can add in the working situation to information that I may not be allowed. I often say to them, I'm going to tell you what happens, but I will deny it if you ever. Yeah. And then, once we've done the callback, then the director comes into the picture. And that's where things get really interesting, because sometimes people say to me, oh, but so-and-so, would have been right for the role, but you went with so-and-so. And I say, if there's that added ingredient, is there a connection with the director and the other people in the scene? There's a trendy catchphrase at the moment, we call it chemistry reads. So where, two people who are supposed to be having a wild affair, or a mother and a daughter, we bring them in together, and that can take quite a long time. It's usually quite a stressful, interactive situation when we try and figure out who works together, who believably you could build a family out of. So all those little extra bits come into it as well. And then you start the process of negotiation. And people forget this, that there's this whole admin side to it as well. There's an understanding of finances, there's an understanding of the director's, of the producer's budget, and how you can juggle, fees that actors want, for, can you pinch from Peter to pay Paul, that kind of thing. And then you've got to get into the contract stuff. And increasingly, because people don't read, you didn't hear me say that, I land up having to talk people through a contract, which, if we go all the way back to my first job as a casting director, was what the producers took the time to teach me. And I've always been incredibly grateful for that. But it did mean that every time a new contract comes in, or something changes via SAG-AFTRA or Equity or any of those upon which ours are based, you're sitting there with a dictionary, or you're phoning up your pet lawyer going, what does this mean? So, there's that side of it too. So then you start putting together your cast list once those people have signed on the dotted line. And then you can sit back and look at the next one, hopefully.
Right, now let's get down to the meat of the whole business, the Emmy Award. I was fortunate to watch on a group where the video of its arrival at your premises was recorded, and rather excitingly narrated by the person doing the video. Could you give us a bit more information on how the whole award process came about and what it was like to be nominated?
It was quite fun. I actually have a nomination from before for Generation Kills, so I kind of understood the process. And last time around, because it was all so new and exciting, and I think it was the first Emmy nomination this country had received at the time. I mean, I'm very old. So I kind of understood the process. So I knew there'd be a nomination, and then there would be a period of time, and then there would be the award ceremony. And it gets, there are 5 nominations per category. And the Emmys, interestingly enough, have been one of the very few of the big award platforms that have included casting right from the very beginning, which is fantastic. Oh, we finally got the Oscars next year. Yes. Yeah. They have opened up. 2025, there'll be a casting Oscar awarded, which will be very exciting. So anyway, so coming back to Njinga, how did I hear about the nomination? The production office, which is an English production company, we would worked as facilitators here at the Film Africa crowd. They sent me an email to say, congratulations. And all this. So then I went onto the Emmy site, the Academy site, and checked up on all those things. Now it's a very long list of, obviously the it gets divided into two. There's the kind of like the heavy hitters, like the top series and the stars and the directors. And then there's us, the people who slog, the creative awards, they're called. Yeah. So I went through this very, very long list. Casting is right at the bottom of the list. So it was, scroll through. So the casting award is for me and for Alyssa. God, I've gone blank. Alyssa, what's her surname? Anyway, I'll think of it in a minute. Who did the UK end of it. I'm so delighted for her because I'd worked with her occasionally when she was still associate or assistant to some of the heavyweight casting directors that I worked with in the UK, people like Nina Gold and those luminaries. And this was one of her very first ones that she'd done as an independent. So for her, this is a huge thing. I'm so delighted because she's a sweetheart. So that was very exciting. And then I thought, okay, well, fine. Then I realized it was actually quite a tight time frame. Last time, it was quite a long period. I think it was almost 2 months, which enabled me to raise funds to get over there. So as you can imagine, that's not a cheap scenario. And it was it was one of the first things they said. We can't fly you over. So I thought, okay. And then, quite honestly, I forgot about it. And I thought, oh, well, that's really nice. I'm not going to be able to get there, so let's see what happens. So by the time it rolled around, I think it was on the Friday night, I kind of went, oh, I think it's the Emmys. And I got my days wrong. And then I realized I got my days wrong, and then Saturday it was busy. I think I went out, church on Sunday, got back. I was having a cup of tea in the garden, and I went, oh, I wonder. So I got my cell phone and I went through the winners and the nominations. So the irony of it was I was sitting in full sunshine in my garden, and what they do with the winners is that they highlight them in gold. So the nominees come up, so all written out, and the one on top is in gold, which of course I couldn't see because I was outside. So we had 12 nominations for Ndinga, and I could see that we didn't get, which was a bit disappointing. And then we came to casting, and I thought, oh, what happened to casting? So it was only when I walked into the shade to look again that I went, oh my gosh, I've won. So at which point I burst into tears, of course, as one does.
Thank you, Christa. We really appreciate you giving up your valuable time to give us an insight into the world of a casting director, to tell us the story of your auspicious award. It's not often that a South African gets to those heights, and I'm afraid I must apologize on behalf of my media colleagues for not giving it the recognition that I think it deserves. And we wish you well in all your endeavors, and we look forward to seeing many, many films and television programs in which you have had a guiding hand to bring the entire story to life as you do so well. Thank you once again, and have a good evening.
Take care, Mark. Thank you.